Hi, everybody, and welcome to our next Leadership Lessons series, CEO interview, with a guest that I've been looking forward to talking to for a very long time, the co-founder and CEO of Sunrun, Lynn Jurich. Hey, Lynn, how you doing?
Hi, thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
So happy to have you too, and just so amazed and impressed with everything you and your team have accomplished, and been really looking forward to this conversation. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, this is a series of interviews we do with incredible CEOs like Lynn, where we talk about if I knew then topics. And so, what lessons did they learn? Key leadership lessons. I'm the co founder and CEO of Comparably. We're an employee review platform, and we help companies with their employer brand and recruitment marketing. I'm also a serial entrepreneur. This is the fourth company I've started. I'm an investor in a lot of technology companies, on the board of organizations. And I've always had the benefit of really amazing mentors that helped me along in my career. And so getting a chance to have folks like you, Lynn, on here and share your stories and what you went through is so meaningful and impactful to so many thousands of people that are on this journey as well. And so many of us know and have been watching with admiration what you've been building for the last, really decade plus at Sunrun. But in your own words, how do you talk about and describe the business today?
Sure. Our goal is to be the most loved utility for consumers. And we started it 13 years ago with solar. And the vision was, everybody's investing in solar panels. The cost is going to come down. And what's so innovative about solar is that you can put it locally. You can use an existing rooftop and then consume the power where it's produced, which we thought this will just disrupt the entire energy industry from having to rely on big centralized power plants and really move it more decentralized. And we thought, the way to really unlock it, though, it has to be around making it affordable and the financing and the business model. So we invented what we call solar as a service. So we're a SaaS company, and so we invented this model where we pay to install a solar system on someone's rooftop. The homeowner signs a contract to buy the electricity from us. So it's zero upfront cost. On average, we save people between 5 and 40% on their power bill. And we offer that now today across 23 states. We have 500,000 customers, and it's scaled pretty quickly. So I'm proud to say that now today we are, I think, the second or third largest owner of solar assets in the U.S. So we have about $15 billion of solar assets either that we've built or in our pipeline. So it's definitely surpassed my expectations.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible. We'll talk a little bit more about your background right before this when you were a VC. But of all the different ideas that you had, of the things that you were thinking about wanting to build, why this category? What was so meaningful, impactful to you, and what was that opportunity you saw, over a decade ago?
Yeah, I've always been somebody who loves nature. I've always been really committed to the environment, and I've always been really committed to very hard problems. So I was at Stanford in the late '90s, undergrad during the first tech boom, and so I was getting into technology. I was doing a lot of work around startups and some research projects around the tech companies, and then when I went back to business school, I did an internship in China, and it just blew me away, the amount of resources that were being consumed. This was 2005, so I think a third of the world cranes were there, and we were just building buildings, and I just thought to myself that the pollution was just whacked me in the face in the morning, and I thought, you know what? All this tech stuff is really interesting, but I want to do something infrastructure here. Like, this is our world, and this is the biggest problem of our generation, is to help, figure out how to use resources more sustainably. So, I had that prepared mind when a classmate of mine approached me about, hey, we should look at solar as a startup, and I was ready to go.
Yeah. So I'd love to dive into your origin story for a little bit. I'm a big comic book fan, and I always talk a lot about the why being the key driver for entrepreneurs. It's not the what and the how. If you got a big why, you'll always figure out the what and the how. Did you feel like at an early age that you wanted to do something entrepreneurial? And I was reading that you grew up in a bit of a woodsy environment, right? And a little bit more in nature. Like, what were those early years like for you, and how did that shape how you thought about your career later on?
I was always a very driven child, and one of my favorite um, Marcus Aurelius quotes is just around consider anything within human potential to be a possibility for you as well. And so I was always I had a very diverse interest, but I always wanted to do it at the very highest level of whatever I did. And so I would that probably emerged first to wanting to be a primo ballerina, to a scientist, to a president of a university. And so I just was always I was always studying that. I think I read almost the entire biography section of my local public library, and just really digging into what have people accomplished, like what have these great people who have dedicated their lives to a passion, what have they been able to do. And so that's always been a real interest of mine, and I think so having the experience after undergrad of going into the venture capital private equity world, where then I got exposed to founders and CEOs, and that really kind of clicked for me as, okay, this is this this resonates. This is what I want to do. And what I was most attracted to was the optimism. The when you're in negotiating these financial transactions and investments, oftentimes it's all around, how do I get a bigger slice of the pie? How do I eke my little way here on the margin to get this little protection or this little extra kind of kicker? Whereas the entrepreneurial mindset is really more about, how do I make the pie bigger? I want to spread it around. I don't want to just try to take more of mine. And so that was really attracted me to wanting to pursue that lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm often a fan of asking people, because I'm so curious, like, what do you consider to be your biggest superpower? Like in the professional context, like obviously you've achieved so much success, like so many of us would want to be able to, create the kind of achievements and accomplishments that you're doing and you with your team. When you think of what you do that's really unique and special and differentiated, like what's that big superpower that's kind of guided you to a lot of the success over the years, in your opinion?
Well, thank you for those generous comments. I appreciate that. I think it's this idea of potential and seeing potential. I love it. Seeing the potential in people, and helping to really bring that out, seeing the potential in the business and where it can go. I think right now we'll probably talk more about infrastructure and climate change and all the above, but I can think of 6 new businesses I want to start right now that I think have huge legs. So I think it's just that, like, seeing that little glimmer of something that could be, and then also pairing it with the drive to achieve the result. Um, I did have, in my 360 feedback, which we get quite a bit, there was some questions around this. So it's interesting to always get that feedback from your peers as well. And I think what that came up for me, but one of the other ones that came up for me from the outside was winning. So I wouldn't have said that myself, but I was a very competitive athlete as well. So I do think I also, I kind of know how to win.
I love that. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. We were reading about how, you were, when you were, I think doing venture, also really successful as a day trader by researching and understanding all these companies, right? And making these really thoughtful, like calculated decisions based upon information. But then here's this other side of you that's talking about optimism and growing the pie, right? And not just staying in that world of math and numbers and investments, but putting yourself in the arena. I'd love to talk about the big things you feel like you learned right before you went to Sunrun, right? Obviously, you've had this kind of stellar academic life and career, and you were in venture, I think, in the early 2000s.
Yeah, I was 2002 to 2005, so post the crash.
And it was your job to reach out and convince a lot of companies and CEOs that they should be working with you and taking your capital. Like, what were the big lessons you learned there, and how do you apply those, as the business leader today?
Great question. A couple stand out for me. The job was unique for a venture capital analyst in that we were also sourcing deals. So we were both, so what that really meant was cold calling CEOs.
Oh.
And especially, we were after companies that were cash flow positive and didn't need capital, and, trying to sort of, get in and provide some secondary, capital and try to be a part of winning companies. And that I knew was going to be a challenge for me. I am a naturally pretty introverted, shy person. And that was one of the reasons why I pushed myself into this job was, okay, I want to learn these skills. I appreciate that sales is everything. And developing that thick skin and some of those, seductive ways to get to people and to win are really valuable skills to have. And so that was really the job during the day, was calling a lot of companies and having a quota essentially of how many CEOs you're able to talk to. And then at night doing the financial modeling that, a more typical financial analyst would do. So it's a pretty challenging, both from a variety of skill set, but also time commitment, which is why I met my husband there, by the way, but that's, a separate point. So I think the two things that really came with me were those that sales ability, and that's just something you just put the time in, and you learn your techniques, you learn how to connect with people, you learn how to deal with rejection, and the amount of reps I got on that, I think really helped me accelerate those skills. And then the second one I would say is, and this I think is really critical for advice I give to females in particular, female entrepreneurs too, is really getting comfortable with the money side of the business. And I think a lot of people are really intimidated to raise outside capital or to negotiate those sort of contracts and, have expectations they should know all about this. And what I realized was, you don't have to be intimidated by money. And you don't have to know what it is. It's the venture capitalists, that's their job. They're going to be better than you at it. So ask as many dumb questions as you want. I saw some of the best entrepreneurs and, ask stupid questions around, those capital raising, but they weren't intimidated by it. They saw it for what it was. It's find the right investor, get the money in, and don't let that part of the business intimidate you, which is good because fast forward, this Sunrun turned out to be quite a capital intensive business. A lot of investment required.
I love that advice. It's such a unique experience you had as you coach your sales team today, right? And I'm guessing you have hundreds, if not thousands, of sales folks. Yeah.
Yeah, probably 3,000 to 4,000.
Amazing. So if you had all 3,000 or 4,000 of your sales team on a Zoom right now, and you were giving them Lynn's 2 or 3 most important pieces of wisdom about how to be successful in their role, like what would you pass on to them of what they should be doing?
What I always say, I've developed this later in my career, is just this appreciation for just the nonverbal aspect of the sale, the energy that you're bringing, the presence that you're bringing, the confidence that instills, I think is just equally, if not more important than the content. And so it's just really, we're fortunate in that we're selling a product that's pretty attractive. It's, saves you money. It's good for the environment. Mm-hmm. You control your own energy independence. And, so really trying to fire my team up with, this is a good thing. First, have faith in that, but, develop your own internal, body appreciation for it. Mental appreciation, energetic appreciation for it, and that will really come through.
Yeah. All right, I'd love to talk about that first year or two of Sunrun. And one of the things that I try to talk a lot about with entrepreneurs that, companies that I invest in or that I'm advisors to, is this idea that, everyone overestimates demand. We all fall in love with our products and the business we're building, and we spend so much time on what we're going to do and not enough time on how we're going to go to market and how we're going to differentiate ourselves and what's going to be that competitive advantage to get customers. And you picked a business, from what it seems like it was your first major venture that had a lot of moving parts, right? I've always done the easier route, which is just, do businesses of zeros and one, just software. It's not as nearly as complicated as the business that, you and your team are building so successfully. What was that first year or two like? When did you feel like this is going to really work? And with so many businesses that start and not end up being successful in the venture space, what was it that you did differently in those very early months and years that you felt like helped give you escape velocity?
Yeah, it is interesting because as we started the business, as we were starting it, my co-founder and I were in business school at the time at Stanford, and so being the good student that I am, I called through everybody in the Stanford alumni database that was involved in the energy industry just to get skills from my VC days, right? So let's call anybody who's an expert, let's get advice, collect the wisdom from those people, and the universal feedback I got was, go home. This is too sophisticated for you, little girl, kind of thing, right? And so that didn't help. It gave me sort of that competitive fire, and I could tell that I could read the people that they're like, oh, maybe there is, sort of something here that gave me enough confidence to say, okay, let's go for it. Then, what we did do is we funded it, a decent amount up front. And we were fortunate in that we had, made some money in our previous career. So we funded it a couple $1 million up front. So we had a bit of a buffer. And then, what I credit a lot of the
which, by the way, is so rare. I mean, today, companies can go out and raise a $20 million seed round. The fact that you and your co-founder did that speaks a lot to who you are, and is just so different than the way a lot of businesses are getting started today.
Yeah, totally. And my husband was super supportive too. So he was, back quickly to, some of the earlier founding stories. So I think it might be interesting for people, but so, he and I met we were peers at this venture capital firm. And then he went to business school at HBS, and we both wanted to be entrepreneurs, and we had just been married, and when Sunrun opportunity presented itself. So we started, I think, a week after I got married. But so then, because I was faster out of the gate versus my husband, he went back to private equity to help support the company. And then fast forward, I think, so we started in 2007, Sunrun. Then my husband, once Sunrun was up and running and I had a, steady salary and it was looking like it wasn't going to be a zero, he joined a co-founder and started a company too. So he got his entrepreneurial journey started.
That's quite the honeymoon to start.
Yeah. So took us a while to have children. Let me put it that way. We were a little busy. So I think, so then back to your question, what I did was I personally went out and sold the product myself. And this is a piece of advice that where I got was, a lot of people, you're starting the company, you're the CEO, you want to go hire the salesperson. And that is a mistake because, one, you're going to read the market, find the product market fit, get your own personal conviction around, how much you really want to kill yourself and put yourself out there for this opportunity. And so I spent, all my weekends putting, at farmers markets, at county fairs, putting flyers on people's cars, taking the phone calls myself, and we had some dark times where we weren't able to, the financial crash happened during that first year. And had I not, been able to firsthand experience the product market fit, I would have, I think we would have thrown in the towel, because what was so challenging about getting this business off the ground was there's a real chicken and egg problem, because our business model was pay for solar systems and then have customers sign 20-year contracts. So you're out a lot of capital up front. And back then, a solar panel was $4 a watt. Today it's 40 cents. So it's literally like 10x the cost when we started. So we were writing checks for $50,000, $75,000 to buy these systems. And then we were going to go out and raise the financing for these pools of homes in order to recoup that capital. And so when we started in 2000, and this was really the real innovation, was figuring out how to pool together all these assets and essentially then go securitize them like a mortgage. And so in 2007, this looked very exciting and attractive, and we had tons of term sheets from the finance companies and the banks to finance it because it was 2007. But then we were rolling and spending all this equity capital, and then we ended up raising our first round, which was about another 9 million-ish. So we had about 12 million in, where we were just, spending all this money. And then all of a sudden the financial crisis hit, and then every term sheet we had was falling away and falling away and falling away, because no bank wanted to fund you until they could do it at like a $40 million pool. They weren't going to go and do the work to fund each other home. So we had to take this bet. And probably most of our initial customers, if I'm honest, bought systems from us because they thought we were going to go bankrupt and they would get it for free. So you just have to sort of swallow the pride on that one. But then, so then we were really lucky in that I think we had probably 10 different term sheets of people who wanted to fund us. And everyone dropped out except for one company, US Bank, who hadn't been exposed to subprime mortgages or other things. And we closed a $40 million fundraising from them just on the day, I think, the market hit the low, like Lehman Brothers on the day it went bankrupt. It was just, we just got through the transom. So huge amount of luck and skill, but a lot of luck in that one to get over the other side. But that was a pretty scary time. I always joke, I think I drank NyQuil to go to sleep almost every night.
Yeah, I don't know any, founder CEO that took their company public or had a massive M&A that didn't have that story, that doesn't have that story that's like, it was down to the wire in this moment. If it broke the other way, who knows where our business would be, right?
Yeah.
What are the, you obviously are someone that's like just a gifted leader and communicator, and you got that it factor, but the person that you are today as a leader, versus when you started Sunrun, what have been the big changes, and how are you different as a leader? And I know you talk a lot about this concept of conscious leadership and the tenets there. I'd love to kind of pull out from you, like, what are the most important lessons you learned on the Sunrun journey so far?
Yeah. It's really about, excuse me, sneeze. Okay, excuse me. So it's really about not being too attached. It's like this idea of like loosening the grip, So I think in the early days, and my personality is so outcome oriented, back to the, zone of genius kind of winning, like I can see what the outcome is and I'm going to go get it. And you can lose sight of really enjoying yourself along the way, or getting too attached to achievement of that outcome. And I think really through a lot of work and coaching and meditation and experimentation, I just have come to realize that you can have preferences, but if you can live without that tight grip with a little more lightness, it's just a lot more enjoyable and creates more creativity and a better outcome. And now I can see, and I play this game in my head all the time around, well, the opposite could be true. Is it good or is it bad? I could tell you could give me anything. It's, hey, it would be bad if Sunrun went bankrupt. Maybe not. Maybe it opens the space for a new competitor who does something even better for climate change. Maybe my co-founder goes out and starts something more incredible. Maybe I do. And just playing with some of those games in your head, and recognizing that, the opposite could be just as true, and you don't really know what is good or is bad, has really allowed me to have more freedom and just enjoyment and creativity. And the team as well.
Yeah. I really relate to that. I've always felt like my superpower is that I could see something in my mind that didn't exist, and I could manifest it into reality, and that I could drive towards that outcome. Right. And take a team and we'll drive towards it together. One of the things I've often philosophically wondered about, Lynn, is the point of view that you got to. Is that something that folks can just get to once we have some more success? Or as you're earlier on in the journey, like that drive that you had, that you were going to win, you were going to go through anything, like you were going to prove everybody wrong, you were going to make this happen. Like, obviously that in part got you to where you are today. Is it a function of time and wisdom and years and success that let you have this perspective, or can someone that's earlier on that journey implement what you're talking about right now?
That's a good question. I think they can. I really do. I think it's that's a false trade-off. Because I do believe that having that, the conscious leadership philosophy, which I would say is this, this sort of presence and approaching challenges from a place of abundance and curiosity and freedom versus a place of constraint and fear, is just delivers better outcomes. Now, maybe we're all just so, sort of the like force of nature, early entrepreneurial days, like are driven by so much fear and and all the other, what I call the below the line stuff,
Yeah.
that, that maybe if you were really in line, you wouldn't put yourself through it. I don't know if possible, but I don't think it changed. I think that the quality of the outcomes are always better in the more present space.
Yeah, I think that's super thoughtful. There was I think one of the distinguishing characteristics of entrepreneurs is that they can delay gratification. They can do things like say, all right, I'm going to forego a salary for a while. I'm going to forego a social life. I'm going to forego having flexibility or balance in other areas because this thing I want to build in the future. And I think in my case, what happened in my previous company, at a company before this I sold to Intuit, is I also delayed the feeling of being happy. I told myself, like, well, I'll get to be happy when I sell this company. And I think one of the things that created that release valve and moved me a little bit closer to what you're talking about is I remember asking myself the question, how do you want to feel when this outcome happens? And can you let yourself feel some of that along the way? Does it have to be binary that you can only feel these feelings once some external outcome happens? And so I think you're right. I really do. It's a hard lesson. It's one that, I certainly wouldn't have been able to figure out early on myself.
Yeah,
I still struggle with.
absolutely. I mean, I think that because as my coach would say, because there's a real payoff, because people are really addicted to adrenaline, and it may be, maybe question the premise of delayed gratification, right? Like, because maybe you're like there's an addiction to this, like to this winning, to the adrenaline, to the intensity that gives people something. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it, right? And so there's that. And I think for me, that's my daily practice is like try to be aware of that and try to break that and at least be aware of it, because it's always going to be there for me too. It's just that the lustful pacing for more and more and more. But I think that's something that's kind of helped me a lot, is that concept of thinking about it as like an addiction to adrenaline.
Interesting. All right, we're going to do the time machine. So if you could take a time machine back into your 20s and you could give that Lynn any advice, what would it be and why?
I think it would just be really around this. It's getting into that conscious leadership kind of state of mind earlier, and the advice and some of this stuff, and this is what I coach leaders on, and younger leaders and other people, is just some of this, your own personal philosophy and things that you can't force it. You can't substitute experience, and there's so much pressure. I think I felt this when I was in, like, what are my values? What is my leadership style? Because you get told, like, you have a point of view, it's important but I'm 27. When I started the company, I've never worked at an operating company. I don't know, and that's okay to not know. And, and just to experiment and get volume of feedback so you can arrive at that a little bit faster. But I think I would have wanted to not put so much pressure on myself to know it all at the very beginning, and enlist people to help, not try to take it all on my own shoulders.
Yeah. I'd love to get your take on how you balance the family aspect. And I know, when you had the IPO, you had your newborn with you, which was a really amazing thing for lots of folks to see. After I sold my last company, I actually wanted to quickly dive in and start Comparably, because we knew we were going to start a family soon. We have 2 small boys now, right? And for me, a big thing I always think about is, well, how do I give my company and all the stakeholders there every bit I have, those 12 hours a day, but save, as much, if not more, of my energy and, time for my kids and my spouse. Like, I mean, with both you and your partner and your husband as entrepreneurs, like, how do you balance it all? How do you make time for your family? And what are the boundaries you draw, and the ways in which you try to go between those 2 worlds?
I wish I had a good answer. No, you're right. I mean, I think that I do love Sheryl Sandberg's advice, though, is like, don't feel like you have to put it off or wait. Just using and I sort of did, because my husband and I were married for, I guess, 7 or 8 years before we had our first child, and I was 35. But I also did the IPO, as you mentioned. I mean, I was found out that I was pregnant. I knew the IPO had to happen. And, I had the baby, I think, about a month before the roadshow started. And I could read the market, and I knew if we didn't go then, it was about to, the window was about to be closed. And so we just went, and it got done. I mean, I brought the baby with me, and I nursed the baby through the roadshow, and she thinks it's pretty cool now that she's been to, 30 cities. And at NASDAQ, when we opened, I had my mom and my daughter, and it was pretty cool experience. So it was tiring, but it got done. So again, would have been easy to wait, and I'm glad I didn't, because you never know what's going to happen on that front. And then, I subsequently have another child. So I have 5 and 2-year-old now, and he came, of course, 3 days before the earnings call. So I told my CFO and co-founder, who's our chairman now, and I said, okay, I'll do the transcript here, but you guys got to help me out on the questions. But again, got done, and I think the keys are really conscious partnering too with your spouse, and a lot of organization around that, and then again all the work we do to be better leaders around being present, and that on that emotional wavelength, that's what I think the kids really respond to. So I really try to fully focus with them and get present with them. And I've learned, the leadership work I've done has made me a better parent. I mean, I've learned now where, if your child's scared, you process that feeling with them. You don't try to cover it up and say, no, it's fine. It's like, because I've learned these skills about, hey, there's so much emotional and body awareness in us, and in work, we often repress so much sadness and so many other things that are really there that we don't let sort of process through. And I try to create a little more space for that in the company, not in a sort of cheesy or uncomfortable way, but just a little bit of an awareness for what's going on, like physically and emotionally, and to process that. And so I think bringing that that sort of approach to the nervous system and the parenting relationship as well is one of the things I'm working on right now, which I don't think I would have gotten there had I not had the pressures at work and had to figure out how to be a decent leader.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole other session, but I may need to get some advice from you on how to do that as well. So we'll save that for the second show. You've obviously built an absolutely incredible culture. You know, this is some of your own employee feedback on Comparably. You're consistently recognized as one of the best organizations for women and diversity. I know that one of the things that really stands out about Sunrun, Lynn, is that you've got, you know, an incredible representation of diverse and female talent at the executive level, which, you know, so many companies are really trying to get their act together and get better representation. What advice and perspective do you have for folks thinking about how to build a great company culture, and then how to really not just talk about wanting to keep better at diversity and inclusion, but actually put it into practice?
Yeah, I mean, on the latter issue, I'll hit that first. It is, use data. I mean, it's a numbers thing. So we were really early on committed to gender pay equity. We have a big company. We dove through all that data. We made adjustments where necessary, and you do the work. And similarly on making sure that that's a screen for both gender and people of color and disadvantaged communities, making sure that's a screen for your hiring, panels, for the number of resumes that you get, for your promotion cycles, and there's a lot of great, employee resource group and conversations to have and a culture to build, but let's really look at numbers and not, and remember that those don't lie. So, we very much have that data orientation. And then on the culture side, I think this is something, and I think I'll admit this. I feel like I didn't know it probably took me 5 years as leading the company to really figure out, hey, what values really do matter to me, and what, how do I really want to operate? And I think I made, some mistakes, but back to my philosophy, maybe they're not mistakes because I learned from it, but around, compromising on certain leaders that may have functional expertise, or, especially when you're young and you think, oh my gosh, but this person has so much experience, but you maybe compromise a little on the edge around the style and the culture issue. And I don't do that anymore. It is, that's number one for me now. And they teach you that lesson in business school, but I find that most people don't learn that lesson until they make a few mistakes and live through the pain. That was my experience, certainly. But now, so it starts really with the leadership and not compromising on the values that matter.
Yeah. If you were doing a one-on-one coaching session with the CEO or with a early stage entrepreneur, right, and they were just asking you, like, what are the most important things that you learned overall of how to build a great, company, how to be successful for all kinds of stakeholders, how to do something that has meaning and purpose? What are going to be your commandments that you're going to share with them to be, as successful as you've been?
Well, one, I wouldn't pursue a business or an opportunity that I didn't think had really high societal impact, because right there, you're gonna attract most likely more of a mercenary type of ecosystem, around what you do. So, when you can start with a foundation of, hey, this is really meaningful work, it gives you a real foundation to attract the right people, have the right, kind of motivations, have that more customer orientation versus just a capitalistic orientation. So that for sure is number one. And then, repeating myself a little bit here, but really figuring out what your values are and how you want to operate, and what your style is, and not compromising on that. And then, there's a lot of just good operating advice that you can read in any number of books, but I would say that those two would be the biggest for me. And I think thinking like a longer term orientation too. I mean, the advice that I give people is so many people are too short term in their thinking or too linear in their thinking in terms of their career path and what they want to accomplish. And I got asked this question. Sequoia Capital, who's was one of our early investors, they do a 7 questions and answers with CEOs. And one of the questions that they ask is, what unit of time is most important to you? And most of the CEOs respond back with 24 hours or a second or whatever. And mine is a generation, and I want to work. I'm 41. I'd like to work for 60 more years, So if you think about your career, so say you're young, you're going to have at least 40 years, 50 years. Think about how much time that is. And just the amount of skills that you can build. Like, you do not need to focus on a linear, next 2-3 years. So I think it really is freeing when you think about that really long-term orientation. I believe Elon Musk probably believes in unlimited capital and unlimited lifespan, would be my guess. And look what he's been able to accomplish.
Yeah, you remind me of the Bill Gates quote: most people overestimate what they're going to accomplish in the year and underestimate what they can accomplish over 10 years.
I didn't know that. I love that. Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So on that note, what's the future of Sunrun hold? What are you most excited about over the next 5 or 10 years for your industry and for your business?
Yeah, I'm really excited about the commitment to decarbonizing energy. I think we can do it. So, energy is what we have to eliminate fossil fuel out of, in our cars, in our homes, and with the technologies that are emerging with cheap renewable solar and wind, with battery storage, with electric vehicles, we can finally do it. So I applaud all the work to have these breakthrough, energy outcomes, but we don't need those sort of technologies. So that's where I disagree with Bill Gates, because we actually have the technologies right now. It's just a societal and political issue. And excuse me, my phone's ringing. And I think we're going to be a big piece of that. So
that was the environment calling to say thank you for all you're doing.
Exactly. That was actually my daughter's school. So there you go.
Yeah.
But so I think that using our existing rooftops and our own cars and our own batteries in our homes, I think we'll be able to power 30-40% of the electric need around, in the US and even globally. So I'm really, really excited to do that. And so that's how we're really evolving the business. The business was first just this solar as a service product, but now we're really building a distributed energy system. It's like the energy internet, and the home is going to be a node on that energy internet. You're going to have a car and a battery and your solar, and when you don't need the capacity of the battery or the car battery or your stationary battery, you're exporting that into the grid and making a virtual power plant and eliminating the need for more centralized resources, making the grid more resilient and smaller. And I think that that's where it's going to go. So I think that over the next 10 years, it'll be even a greater rate of change for Sunrun than this first 13.
Well, I can tell you, as someone who's been, watching your business from afar, and we've had a little bit of a window into your company, on Comparably, and seeing the feedback that comes in, we've always been, just so unbelievably blown away by, your team and your leadership and the business, and obviously like what you've accomplished in the public markets. Lynn, you're just an incredibly inspiring person. If there were more people in the world like you, this would be a much better place. And I'm very privileged and honored that you took some time with us to share your story today. There's so many of us that are rooting you on. You've accomplished so much in such a short period of time. I really genuinely hope you are working at 110 and 120, because the things that you're going to do for everyone is just going to continue to be amazing.
Oh, thanks, Jason. It's my pleasure. And I what you've accomplished has been phenomenal as well. So it's fun to be able to trade stories and our experiences. And next step will be the parenting conversation, I guess.
I'm looking for. I can use your advice. This morning, I could have called you to ask for some advice with Alexander. Well, for all of you that are continuing to join us and on your journeys to build and do something amazing, thank you so much. We'll continue to do our best to have incredible guests like Lynn to share these words of wisdoms. Stay safe, stay sane. Hopefully things are on an upward trend for everybody and people are going to get a chance to spend more time together in person. Lynn, one of your sales reps may get a call from me pretty soon here for solar panels at our place. And so you got one more to-do list on my list as well. And thank you again for your time, and thank you all for joining us. We'll see you all soon.
Take care.